So I watched another anime movie on Netflix called Bubble. I'm gonna proceed to spoil it. So if you want to see it without spoilers, don't I guess watch this video. Um, look. Wow. Oh no, oh no, he's dead. What? How did he even get here? Well, this is a sort of good illustration as well. Is the death of this bug an irreplaceable tragedy? You know, we just accept that it's here and it's dead. I don't know. Um, that idea has still held on to me. This is sort of the way that my mind works. Unfortunately, sometimes something just takes hold and it won't let go, or I can't let go of it until I figure it out. For now, you always circle back around to the same things in a deeper way, but it's rather annoying, but also, I suppose, a blessing in disguise, because I do see some people who walk around with the same low-grade issues for years and years, and that's not something I aspire to. Ow. Anyhow, it was a similar theme to the video about, or to the other one. It was involving this sort of, okay. So, these spiritual beings that are these bubbles that start falling onto the earth mysteriously, and then this girl who sort of forms from them and is an angelic kind of creature who becomes human. And then dies at the end, or is transformed back into the bubbles, and it's really sad. And the boy they've fallen in love, he's heartbroken, but it's necessary for her to do that in order to restore the wider world, in order to save him. So your self-sacrifice narrative. And I'm and then there was this, but then also it zooms way out into into patterns. It talks about the spiral patterns that are inherent in the world, and then also zooms way out at the end and talks about the galaxy, and the cycles of dissolution and reintegration, and ow, my ankle. I gotta reposition it. Ugh. The cycles of dissolution and reintegration, and how in however many billion years the Andromeda galaxy will collide with the Milky Way, and how the bubble girl and the boy will meet up again in some amount of time. But it made me sad. And now I'm walking around looking at everything with that lens over it, and I'm ugh. So this is my attempt to show what's inside of my head is much faster, much more detail, and it's three-dimensional and moves, and there's not as many words. It's better in my head. But I guess the question that I was bothering over, or am bothering over, or the thought that is there, something wrong with the universe, just in the inherent structure of things? Because it seems like a part of me recoils from certain aspects of just the way things are, or at least when those are presented in a certain way. I don't like the idea that everything and everyone that I am and that I love will just dissolve and be turned into something else with time. That's non mi piace. They don't seem right. Ouch. And so yeah, this leads to the question: is there something wrong with the universe? Well, I guess breaking that down a little bit, if you take this little thing as the universe as a whole, It's all defining the terms, right, always. So if you take this as the universe as a whole, well, okay, then you have different situations within it. So if you're living in a box, or like in a system and in a world, essentially, with domination hierarchies and people exercising power and control over you, and like isolation and a lot of what we see in the society, then yeah, essentially, basically, there is something wrong with the fundamental structures that are controlling your life. And you can be pretty deep into this to where that seems like that's all that there is. So essentially, yes, like, basically there's something wrong. Now, does that, the something wrong with the universe would suggest that it's like, you can't change it, whereas you can, all of these are things you can change. But, secondarily, if you yourself are a being that's sort of twisted like that, and it has internalized one of these systems, and is ignorant, and just doesn't know how to function, this is the way that I feel a lot of the time. I'm just like, I'm in sort of a not ideal place, and I'm young, and don't know how to function, and a lot of things are painful, so basically, yeah, it basically feels like there's something wrong with the universe. Also, at, like, difficult moments in life, all is pain, and, in those moments, this thing is that they're limited times, then it can be like, oh, everything's bad, like, there's something wrong. But this very term of the universe as a whole, if we want to take just the whole thing with over all time and in all systems and all subsystems and with, like, all beings, we really can't, like, the very idea of giving some kind of description of the universe as a whole requires some sort of perspective and some, like, being's perspective, which is necessarily going to be, and I don't use this term in an entirely negative way, but biased, and, like, that being is going to be defined in some way and, like, limited in some way, is going to have a certain perspective. So, yeah. In order to get this kind of overall view, like, we all have to form ourselves, /grow, /heal, especially if you come from over here, /heal, and be able to form its own coherent, like, view of the universe as a whole. And there's always new beings coming into being, and there's always all of these different umwelts, so, like, the world from the perspective of a certain creature, interacting and harmonizing or having dissonance between them. So that all sort of goes into what would be the universe as a whole, is the umwelt and the world of all beings. That said, we know that the most, like, complete and enlightened beings and basically people in our the earth, but the most, like, complete and enlightened will generally say, yeah, alilipona, that's intokipona, and it means everything is good. Basically, we'll have an expansive and positive and hopeful view of things, and you can probably trust them more than, somebody from over here. So those people would be able to more see the bigger picture, and they'll see more of the bigger picture and harmonize more of these smaller and integrate more, and the more you integrate, the more it seems like things start to look okay. And, like, there is not something wrong with the universe. Yeah, so to get from a place of both just youth, but then also especially, like, brokenness, it seems to be about, like, well, because there's time, because things change, always, and because of, like, free will and actions, and being able to take actions and affect things, it's not like, is there something wrong with the universe, like some kind of a status, or what is reality, or, like, how does it work, as much as, like, a way of being, right? So things move one way or another, certain patterns aren't being manifested, and it's like it's moving. Therefore, the process seems to be like about learning about patterns that are consistent through time and just like getting a wider perspective. And for instance, realizing that, okay, there will be highs and lows and highs and lows and highs and lows, but all of these come together into a greater narrative that is overall hopeful and involves love and involves things lasting and being healed and being healed. Honestly, any view that, I don't know, you can't really live without assuming that. You just stop doing everything. I mean, it would be pointless. I don't know. There's optimistic nihilism. Well, anyway. So, like, for instance, when the girl and he I forget his name, were together, that was good, and then we have this, like, terrible thing of him, like, losing her, and I was like, is that any of it worth it? Well, yes. And then there's the hint of, like, them being reunited later, and it sort of continues to in and out. And then a lot of it is what you define as good and bad and, like, your pain tolerance, essentially, and those things also change, I think, as you grow. So as each being kind of comes through this process, then they're able to have their own healthier perspective and their own better world to live in. And to an extent, I guess, it's something that each consciousness, like, has to learn for itself. And gets to learn for itself, and once you learn it, then you learn it, and then you're kind of like, okay, have that perspective, which is meaningful. Oof. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so learning, like, the patterns, and then just, the ways, and the way, and how to properly live, and what's salient, and becoming an expert just in life in general, just like in any other field of expertise, knowing what is salient, what to look for, and what is important and not, and how things work, and developing, like, patience and all of that, which then, by internal changes to the being having the perspective, changes also the perspective in the world around, of course. Yeah. Was there anything more for that? Let me see. I don't think so. Yeah. Because, like, a lot of the things that make me think that make me feel like my world is not great are that I don't know how to think right, and my thoughts are, like, always stuttering and going off track, and I can't do what I want to do. I want the wrong things. I have unrealistic expectations, etc. And then also, there was a really touching scene in the anime. It was touching to me, where the main character, the boy, he is, like, hypersensitive to noise, and as a little kid is always, like, covering his ears, and people sort of judge him and are worried for him for that. And, like, his mom gives him some headphones, and then he's happy, and, like, he can function in the world. And it always touches me, I don't know. Like, and especially I know so many kids are different, or, just, especially, like, talented kids, or if you're on the autism spectrum or something, and it's beautiful when there's care shown so that they can, like, fit into the world. Uh, so, and there's that quote that I have on one of my Pinterest boards about loving someone to the point of invention. I think that's how love works, and that would be another, or a way to summarize what we learn as we grow. Is what is love and how to have more of it, and that, I guess, when you have this love for something or for a certain aspect of reality, or like a certain being, then you have like this endless energy and of invention, and just like to heal them endlessly and to protect them endlessly and to make sure that they are as safe as possible, and like to make the world better endlessly for them. And that gives a lot of hope, and that gives a lot of like, and I don't know, there's just a feeling of invincibility when, I mean, coupled, I suppose, with the terrible fear that they would get hurt, but also a feeling of confidence that, like, yeah, I mean, I love them so much, like, they're gonna be fine eventually. I will find a way, and it just, yeah, it's very convincing. And, that's the kind of thing that could make and keep the world a good place. And then I'm thinking about things like, because I'm sometimes upset, like right now, again, I got my own issues, and I don't know, I'm causing harm. There are things that I'm doing that are causing, like, harm for other people, certainly other beings, and I don't know, like, I go and I kill ants, and I get the pests out of my house, and then, of course, there's all of the systems of corrupt systems that our money's going to, and, like, yeah, I go climb a tree and, like, break half the branches off the tree. I'm like, it worked hard to grow those, and I shouldn't be doing that. But I guess it feels right to say that each, I lose the term, like each, I don't know, you do what you can, and you take care of what is yours to take care of, in your own sphere of influence, and love that, and heal that, and then that slowly expands. But for that which I can't properly, like, love, or the mistakes that I make and harm that I cause, I mean, there's a psalm that says that God, like, feeds the animals and takes care of them, and so essentially that's what I'm saying. But that each area of beings, what is the word I'm even thinking? Each little world of a different creature, or like each little world in Umvelt has sort of its own sphere of that kind of love and care, and like somebody to, I don't know, take care of them and care enough to say, okay, this is not, like, I'm gonna fix this. Eventually. And again, it's all with time, but it is always all with time. So yeah. No, then eventually you arrive, you never arrive, but like more and more getting to a position where the spheres become expanded, and basically your perspective is so pure and like so not, I would say, not universal and all-encompassing in a vague way, but almost, because of the principle of like the transcendent particular, or almost that the more specific you get, also the more universal you get. I mean, we all know that what's powerful in, say, a film is going to be that, and what conveys the most universal message is going to be the very most specific and individual moment, and like the little details. So anyway, once you have your perspective to be that, like, as more as it gets widened, you can know that it's good vibes only, right? And you're like, basically able to love all of the worlds and the different beings that are coming into contact with you and yours. More and more. But it takes time, and especially, again, if you come from over here, mostly you have to just trust that, yeah, you're kind of flailing around and hurting a lot of things and hurting yourself, but make the best of it, and eventually everything will be fixed. Or, like, somebody will fix it or you'll fix it. Sometimes it's hard to accept that, because I'm like, I see that I'm making mistakes and causing harm to myself and others because of them, and I hate that, but it's the only way that I'm going to learn, so, because I happen not to have the wisdom to, or just to be too damaged to learn without it. And I'm like, man, but oh well. So in the end, the question is a little bit of a pointless question, or at least it doesn't really matter whether you say no or yes. Like, no, the way that the universe fundamentally is, however, whatever that means even, like, is fine. Or yes, no, there's something wrong, and, like, we need to, well, in either case, because of this, and because everybody has their own world, the upshot and the conclusion to draw is go forth and make the world a better place. Yeah. And love whatever is in your power to love. And that it's good. It's, yeah. So I guess it's, or like, not worrying. This, like, not worrying if I don't have in me, at this point, love enough to embrace, like, animals I've been thinking about a lot lately, so say that. Enough to, like, embrace all of them, and, like, I see vaguely on the edges of, like, my world that they're suffering, and I'm like, what do I do about that? Like, that seems like it's bad, but I'm like, no, I figure others are taking care of that right now. It's not really under my area of consciousness, or I'm not able to, I'm tied up where I am, so, but I trust that I have certain things that I'm passionate about that nobody else is, and that I'm able to do and fix and, like, heal that nobody else is, principally this. And the same applies to what is outside of my realm. And there's a more poetic, like, child story way to tell that, and I want to write many books, but they're forming very slowly, so I will have to let them form slowly. And on a similar note, everybody's perspective is, and everybody's world is a little bit, it's harmony, right, but it's, like, not exactly the same. I actually made another video on that a while ago, didn't I? So, you know, you have to choose your own story, and it's always going to, any story, I mean, it's not, yeah, any story is going to highlight certain things and hide certain things. So you want to choose the story, or as I was thinking about last night, the way of defining yourself or defining anything that highlights what you feel like is most like you. I'm always figuring out whether to use the first or second person. If I use the first person, it's, like, weird or annoying because I'm just talking about myself. And if I use the second person, it feels like I'm lecturing the viewer with my wisdom, which is not the tone that I should go for. We'll see. I don't know what else you just say we. One. But this is another one. I think this is where part of what this comes into is confusion in terms between a Western and an Eastern, or even just like a traditional and a modern mindset, which is basically the same thing, as René Guénon and Fritjof Schuon point out. So, in the, like, when you start getting into the wide universal patterns of things, there's a lot about, like, we are all made of the stars, and we just come into being for a little while, and we come out of being, and we become other things. You know, your cells had once been somebody else, and they'll once be somebody else, and they'll once be, like, a plant and water and all this, so this is fine, and this is great, and we're just part of the universe. But I think that a lot of people misunderstand that. I know that I misunderstand it. There's something about that concept that feels fundamentally like wrong. Like in a George MacDonald, don't accept something if you feel it is wrong kind of way. Which indicates, I'm misunderstanding it. But as long as I'm misunderstanding it, I can't accept it, because I'll be accepting a twisted version of it. This is what George MacDonald, I'll be accepting like a twisted version of it that highlights and hides the wrong things. So better to accept something that's maybe like not technically as true, or maybe a more naive narrative, but that nevertheless highlights the right aspects of the underlying reality, or not even underlying, of the full reality that's being described in these different ways. So that idea of like, we all are just transformed over and over into different things, versus something like the resurrection, in which the conventional imagination is that I and my loved ones and the things that I love, and will come back and be recognizable and coherent as themselves in their own body, basically, and in their own body. And I don't know. I'm sure it's both. Like, I can see how it's both, but I feel like this type of thing is the heart of it, even if maybe the full truth doesn't look like the conventional picture, and even if there is truth to that nothing is permanent and the self isn't permanent and all that, or not the self, the ego, and again, I think that's another thing that, I know a lot of people misunderstand that. I have my own half-baked thoughts about it. Because, okay, I guess I'll go off on this tangent. The ego being your identity. Yeah, I guess, from my understanding, it's my job to stay. Awen is a word in Tokipona that means both protect and wait, and stay is quite a nice word. But it's my job to stay me and to take care of that sphere and keep it together and take care of it. And from the chaos, And so yes, I embrace being transformed, and that involves letting go of some things. And it's sort of painful, and that is like a death and rebirth type thing. But it happens in sort of successive stages, and I think that morally, I can only embrace to be transformed into something that I identify as myself, as redeeming all the positive aspects of me, or of my loved ones. And instead of saying, I will just cease to become myself and just abandon all this, and just blah. I don't think that's, I don't know. I've had a lot of changes, and I can say very much I feel like a different person from who I was before. And a much freer and a much less defined and limited person, and much more universally in tune with other people and with everything and all of this. But in each case, it's been shedding dead skin and shedding dead parts that have been limiting and that have not truly been me. So I think that's how it must feel, and even if that looks like, I don't know, being completely scattered or just becoming many other little worlds or something, the experience or the central truth of that would still be the same type of thing that happens when you go through a life change and you are, you grow and transform as a person. If that makes any sense. Yeah. Because I think with this, it's again a question about time, and then a question about the body, and what is a self, and what is a person, or a soul, or a self. To me, I don't know, something that I observe as far as the ego or self, how we identify ourselves, when I hear the term ego used in a negative sense, I always equate that with the limitations that I put on myself are fears that are bad limitations that genuinely limit me. So, or you're fear, and resistance and just bad aspects that are sort of dead and like limiting. Versus but then I also notice that there are certain aspects of me that are limiting and that mean that I'm like me and not another person, or that I'm not able to do certain things, or I don't want to do certain things, but that are like creative constraints in that it's with that limitation in place, I'm actually able to have a more universal view and more love, and like it's better than if I would to just like and like leave that and not have that sort of structure and not have that limitation. I guess, yeah, and it's I don't know, and maybe that because the idea of death is dissolution and like leaving all of those behind, but everything's defined in some way, otherwise it wouldn't exist at all. And as soon as something starts to exist and pull out of like the chaos, it becomes limited in certain ways. I think there's certain limitations about me that I can say. For instance, constantly thinking that I can't accomplish my goals, or like that I'm not worthy of being loved in the same way as I feel for others. That's a limitation that I would consider part of like my ego. That's bad, that needs to go. But something like I'll make a fuller, I'll like talk about this more in detail later, but all of the examples I'm thinking of are too personal. I can't use them. Yeah, I guess if you think in your own life, the people and things that you love and have as priorities, and that they sort of areas where you're biased, that make you who you are, there are some of those. Like, say I was clinging to a political ideology. Oh, if I let that go, that would be probably better for me. But that would be better for me, and that's like a limiting limitation. But say I have, no, there has to be some kind of limitation for us to actually exist at all. But basically, in short, there's like, to me at least, from what I see, there's good attachments and bad attachments. Attachment being the other word, because of course in the Eastern it's all about like detachment and being attached to nothing, and I don't quite think they mean what we think they mean entirely. I don't think it means, stop loving your family or stop loving, I guess the ultimate example of this is like a committed relationship. That's limiting yourself, right? Because you're spending your life with this person and not with any of the billions of other people that there are. Nevertheless, if it's a good relationship, and maybe in this case it's a bad one, and you figure out, okay, yeah, this person's not good for me, and this is genuinely limiting my life, and I should let that go. But maybe it's a good limitation, as it were, and by saying, okay, no, I'm gonna like center down and just sort of focus centrally on this person, then your whole world like opens up at the same time in a paradoxical kind of way, and you can experience a fuller and like deeper love than if you were flittering around between said billions of other people. So it's stuff like that, or a passion or job that like you dedicate your life to, and similar things, or just obviously the primary example is just our bodies, which are made of limitations. And yet this is what allows us to exist and experience the world. So, I don't know. All of this, in short, we make the world a better place by growing ourselves. And someday the bubble girl will come back into her full human form, and what's his name? will be reunited. I insist on it. That's the other thing. It sort of all depends on, every story is only a little fraction of the full narrative, which doesn't, it keeps growing, right? So it all depends on sort of where you cut it and where you choose to finish it. So there's always a chance to tie things back together and make it happy. And you could say there's always a chance to then break that back up and have another tragedy. And yeah. Again, bias and choosing what you're going to look at.